All right, so fun blank screen. I don't have any slides, but good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ken Winner. I work at a company called Steady. We are a business-to-business SaaS company. So the kind of tagline for Steady is the goal being to process every business-to-business transaction on the planet. And that's what we're shooting for. Everyone of our teams pretty much uses CDK, and we've all adopted it, pretty much all TypeScript stack as well. So sorry if you were hoping for some Python today, but really the goal is to kind of show off what the CDK can do, what it can provide, some of the, I don't know if I want to say best practices, but my favorite practices and constructs. And then I also want to touch on something called Progen, which is one of the CDK Amazon team members, Elad. He wrote it, and it kind of helps you like set up the CDK a little more easily and generate other projects as well. And I've done a little bit of work with that, so I just wanted to kind of show it for scaffolding and managing your CDK projects. So can everyone see my screen okay?
Yep, looks good.
So I wanted to do everything live, so bear with me as we struggle. I do have a little bit of code on another screen, but yeah, we will go ahead and kick it off by just doing the more vanilla, like default CDK way of initializing an application, and we're going to use TypeScript. So you just run your CDK init. You can do sample app. I think they have construct, and you can also do an empty project, I believe. I forget the options because I almost never stand it up this way, which I'll, like I said, show at the end. See if we can zoom in here, make it a little larger. So when you do this, you get a bin folder, and my directory is called Cdk demo, so it names everything based off of your directory. But we get this bin, which is the kind of like root level of your application. So it creates a Cdk app, and then this, scaffolded, templated Cdk demo stack for you. And then if we look in here, we can see that it created, it went ahead and pulled in these CDK packages, and then it created a CDK stack for us, a queue construct, an SNS topic construct, and then it added that subscription. This is just your default creation of a stack, right? You have the concept of an application, and an app can have multiple stacks. Maybe you have, 3 different environments, and you want to break it up into a dev stack, a pre-prod stack, and a prod stack, or you can create things a little differently. And maybe you just have one stack, and then you pass in an environment variable or some other way of determining which environment it is or stage, whatever. So a lot of different ways to do stuff. I'm only really going to walk through the kind of simple way of just setting this up. And then maybe at the end, we can kind of walk through other stuff. So let's jump over. We aren't going to use SQS today. I'm going to do SNS to a Lambda function to DynamoDB to just kind of show a simple little workflow here. And so we're going to go ahead and delete this queue. And I like to create a functions directory. And then we're just going to call this processor, and then index.ts. One thing to note that is pretty important. If we look at the dependencies, they're all pinned at 1.108.1. So in version 1 of the CDK, every package is a separate NPM package or Python package, right? So there isn't just one install of every resource that you want. Some people have found that to be pretty frustrating. CDK 2 is working on that, where it will just be one large package, and you'll get every sub package underneath that. So hopefully it'll help with some of these versioning issues that they've run into, where 1.108 and you want to upgrade to 109, but there's actually a breaking change, even though that's not semantic, right? So that's just something to look out for. And let's just go ahead and we want the AWS CDK, AWS Lambda, and we want CDK AWS Lambda Node.js. So they also have Lambda Python. And what that does is bundles up your packages for you. That way you don't have to worry about installing dependencies and stuff like that. So for TypeScript, it uses ESBuild. You can run it Docker, or you can install ESBuild yourself, which I will do actually because it's faster. And jump back over here. So we don't have this queue anymore, but that's fine. And we are going to say import time from and let's do Node.js function. So these are really the two things that we need off the bat. So you can create a new function. We're just going to say processor function. And then you say new Node.js function. And then they have the concept of a scope, right? So a stack scope is an application, or a nested stack would be a stack. And then for a construct, the scope is going to be a stack typically, or it can be another construct. So you can just say this, and then you have to give it an ID. Nothing can have an empty string, and the IDs have to be unique because that's how they build the CloudFormation logical IDs for you. And then you can give it some properties. So we're going to just say processor function. And now here we have all of our types. So this is, I mean, really my favorite thing, right? This works with Python and everything else with your IDE, but instead of having to install something for CloudFormation or, do any crazy linting or whatever, all of these are here for you. They're all typed out. And we want to do runtime, and that runtime is going to be Node.js. And then we need an entry, and I'm just going to be lazy and do functions processor index.ts. Then you need a handler. So if you're familiar with Lambda functions, we would say, export function handler, whatever. We're just going to call ours handler. And then you can do memory size, environment variables, whatever. We're just going to do stage demo. And then they have this, which is interesting to me. So there's this log retention value that you can put on this function construct, right? So what this will do is set your CloudWatch log group retention, right? So instead of never expire, it'll be, a day, it'll be 3 days, whatever. So I'll say it's really nice, but also kind of side effecty and not nice in some cases. This stands up a custom resource, and then that actually changes it for you, right? So if you're not super familiar, you're like, oh, this is great. But then you go in and you see, why is this custom resource in here? What's this other Lambda function, or what's going on? So they do that in some places. It's just something to kind of look for. But we'll just go ahead and set this to 1. So now we have our new processor function. We have our SNS topic, and we have this old subscription where we're not using SQS anymore, right? So we'll do Lambda subscription, and then we just pass it our processor function, and that's it, right? So other than we haven't written any Lambda code, and we haven't written any, or we haven't hooked up our Dynamo table, but just with, what is this, 10 lines, 12 lines? We've got our topic, our function, and our subscriptions. So then you can do CDK synth. So this will actually synthesize your stack into a template, and it failed because this needs to be index.ts, and this actually doesn't do anything. So this should make everything actually run now. So when you run synth, it actually spits out just a YAML template in the console. So we could, look through all this. It has everything for you, or you can go to this cdk.out folder, and we can look at our stack template here. And this is what will actually be deployed, the JSON CloudFormation. So everything from the CDK actually just goes into raw CloudFormation. So you're still using CloudFormation, you just don't have to write it, and you get nice things like loops and typing and whatnot. There are some defaults where it's creating this service role for us. You can pass in your own role to the function. It adds all these metadata values. That's pretty much it for that. So I cheated and I wrote this function code so I wouldn't have to do it live. But we will need to install the Lambda types and the AWS SDK. All right, so if we do another CDK synth, these assets are the Lambda functions that get packaged for you. So if we look at this, ES build is actually running and then pulling in everything and running everything for us. We can look at these different ones, right? So here's the empty one, and this should be the one that failed maybe, or is this is the actual new one? Yeah, because it has the types. This is the latest one. Or sorry, I lied. This is actually that log retention custom resource assets right here. So creates a log group and doesn't throw if it exists, blah, blah, blah. So now we can, let me do this. We can do CDK deploy, and it should just deploy our stack because there's only one in there. If you had multiple stacks, you would have to specify which stack you want to deploy. So we'd have to say like CDK demo-dev or test or prod or whatever, however you have it set up. This is letting us know, it's making changes to IAM policies. And you can say require approval never, and it won't ever remind you of these. We're going to say yes and starts deploying. So creates your CloudFormation change set. And then we can, let me pull this up over here. Pop over to the stack and start deploying, create in progress, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and while that goes, we're going to add in our Dynamo table. We need to pull in the package, DynamoDB. It's mad because we don't have it installed. See, as you can tell, this is pretty annoying to have to do this every time. And so I'm pretty excited for V2 to come out and we won't have to do that anymore. Okay, now we have our stuff here. Maybe. There it goes. I just have a slow computer. Okay, so now we're going to just do this. We still pass it that. We're going to say data table, whatever. We don't really care. And then the only thing that you have to have is a partition key. So we're just going to give it a name, ID, and we're going to give it a type of attribute type dot string. So then when we want to pass in an environment variable, we can just say table name, table dot table name. You can also do the ARN, whatever. So one thing to note is that they tokenize a lot of values. So if you were to print this out at synth time, this table name, well, actually, we're just going to do it. And we will do CDK synth. probably makes a lot more sense. So if you can see here, I'll just put it here because this is a little larger. It does this tokenization. So at synth time, you don't know the value, but at deploy time, it fills everything in for you. It's kind of quasi magical, and they did a Twitch series called Cdk Construction Zone, and they kind of explain this whole token process, and they'll do way better than me. So I'm not going to try. So if you're interested, you can just check that out. But it could bite you. And if you need like a specific value, like maybe you need the bucket name that's going to be generated, there are ways of making that happen. But we don't have to worry about that right now. So here, the stack completed. So we had our different resources, but we don't have a table yet. So we're going to go ahead and create that table. So now we have the table here. We're passing in the table name. We've still got our log retention. We've got our subscription topic. So we're going to do another CDK deploy. There shouldn't be any permissions changes. So it's not going to ask me those questions this time. And let's see. Let's make sure. Okay, so now we've got an update in progress. And if we pop back over here, we should see our stack updating. And we should see the table anytime now. Why is CloudFormation so slow?
If I could count on one hand the number of times I've said that, it'd be lucky day.
Yeah. Okay, we've got, wait, what? Let's do this. Oh, I was looking at the resources anyway. We wanted events. Why didn't anyone correct me? So here is creating our table. If we jump over here, we can see that it created our table. I don't know where everybody's opinions are. I prefer auto-generated table names and stuff like that, but just note, if you look at this, right, CDK demo stack, data table, and then this unique ID. So here we called this data table. And then if we look over here at our stack, we're calling it CDK demo stack, right? So if you can kind of work through the flow, it takes the stack name and then it depends on the resource ID. Silly Zoom thing is popping up. It depends on the resource ID, and then it makes a unique version of that, right? So you can imagine if you have like nested constructs, or when I first started using the CDK, I would name things like environment dash data dash table dash whatever, right? And so then you get these like really long kind of nasty names. You can just name something like this and it'll append the stack as you go. Let's see, should be done. Update is complete. So now we have our table and we don't have any items in there. So I didn't test this, so let's hope that it works. We're going to do publish.js, node publish, cannot find module faker, okay. UID, we want to do that. And I also need to grab this topic ARN. And if we look through here, can be lazy. CDK demo topic. Oh, cool. Not helpful resources. There we go. Go ahead and copy this. I don't want the link address. Okay. Fingers crossed this works the first time. Otherwise, I'm going to just move on. Didn't want to do that either. All right, reference error topic ARN is not defined. What? Oh, look at that. I can't write JavaScript code either. fingers crossed. Hey, it actually didn't throw any errors. So hopefully we can see some stuff in our table, but the function probably failed. So let's take a look. Okay, well, the point of this isn't to show you how to do a Lambda function to DynamoDB. I'll leave that as an exercise for you. But we set up our resources. We've got our stack. You can do some pretty nice things with SSM parameter store. So if we take, let's say you want a stack output, want the table name. So we can do new cdk.cfn output, this table name output. And then I think you just give it the value. So table name. So now we easily have that, it's tokenized, it passes it in when we need it. But you can also do a string parameter. So we can say new string parameter, table name parameter. And then we'll give it some props. So you give the string value, and then you can also give it a name if you want it to be, some sort of deterministic name like Cdk demo stack param, and this value will be table name. We can do another Cdk deploy. So pretty simple to use SSM. And this is kind of one of my favorite useful use cases. So let's say we wanted to pull this into another stack and you want that value. You can just do whatever, I don't care. We'll do table param equals string parameter dot from string parameter name. And then you say whatever that was. Sorry, I'm trying to make this somewhat formatable and readable. So this will actually load that value in. And then if you wanted to use that value in the other stack, you would say table param dot string value, and that'll give you whatever's stored in that. This makes it really nice for passing values through the CDK. Since we added that CFN output, now here in our outputs, you can see CDK demo stack table name output, and it gives us that value. Trying to think, there's one other. Oh, yeah. So I know some people here like Terraform and are kind of from that realm. So you get some nice state things with Terraform, right? You can pull in resources that already exist. Maybe someone created it manually, or maybe you want to migrate stacks, or whatever. So this kind of from paradigm will allow you to do that. Let me see if it works for table dot. Yeah, you could do table dot table arn, from table attributes, or from table name. So this allows you to reference it as if it's in the stack without it actually having to be created by the stack. Super helpful in kind of, building some of those things without having to do, man, I don't even remember how to do import values in CloudFormation anymore. I've just been using this for quite some time. Okay. That is what I'll call vanilla setup. We did a CDK init, we created our stack, and then, we got this bin file with our app, and then we created this stack. And then we, manually installed all of our packages, dependencies, and stuff. So here we're going to do one with Progen, and you just do npx Progen new AWS Cdk App TS. I think that is right. And like I said, Progen was developed by one of the team members. Great project, love it. And you can do a ton of really nice, great things using it. You can kind of, the idea behind it is that it's a CDK for software projects, right? So You can create your React app using it. You can create a CDK construct. You can create a TypeScript. He's recently added support for like creating a Python project using Progen, and I think extended support for Java. So I didn't touch on JSII, but if I have a little more time here at the end, I'll do that. So if we look at what gets created for this, it looks very similar to the other stack, right? Except instead of bin and lib, we've got main here. And this is very similar, right? We've got export class, my stack, extend stack, this kind of default environment using the CDK default account and region, which is whatever your credentials are. Here's how you would do maybe two different stacks, right? Like maybe you have my stack prod, and then you got your prod environment, and then synthesizes the app. I still typically create some other folder in here, personal preference, and then I would just do like stack.ts, and then I kind of pull all this out and put it into here. I'm not going to walk through creating every single resource because all the CDK code is still the same, but you can do some kind of nice project management stuff with this. So Cdk dependencies, and let's say we want AWS CDK, AWS Lambda, Node.js, whoops, DynamoDB. And then if we run npx progen, it will install all of our dependencies for us at this CDK version. And since we don't have this version pinned, it'll just give us the, I forget the name for it, the little caret thing. Where are they? Here we go. Yeah, so you can see, 195.2. If you want to pin this to 1.100.0, and you can say CDK version pinning true. I have PJ alias to npx progen, so that's why I did that. And then if we pop back in here, now you can see they're pinned at this, right? So it makes managing those dependencies kind of easier throughout the project. And I've used Progen for quite a few things now, but I would have felt like not right if I didn't mention it for this. That covers the basics. So let's take a look at some third-party constructs. So the idea behind CDK resources are kind of three tiers. You've got the level 1 construct, which is the CFN resource. So if we come back over here to not this one, we want to come over here. So, well, the CFN output is a good example, right? This is a low level 1 construct for an output, and these are the exact CFN parameters. This table construct is a level 2 construct, so it has some kind of like nice, pretty defaults built in for you. But you can also do a CFN table. So if we wanted that, we could do new CFN table. And then we look at our props. They're all very similar, but it doesn't have the higher order effects, the higher order levels. So some constructs or some packages don't have any level 2 constructs. For example, time stream, glue is pretty, you have to use almost all level 1 constructs, things that not a ton of people in the community have updated and gotten around to. But then there's the concept of a level 3 construct. So a level 3 is, someone in the community has built something on top of that. So I have a couple out there that I just pulled up, and you can see like this CDK bucket deployment explorator. So there's a construct called S3 deployment, which will deploy like a single page application to your S3 bucket. And if we look here, we got import bucket deployment. We create our source bucket, and then we do a bucket deployment, and it'll deploy all your files. So by default, there's this prune value called prune true, and every time it deploys, it deletes everything in there and then redeploys all the new files. What I was finding was that, maybe someone had an older version cached on their browser, and I'd go to load it and it would just be a white screen. So this allowed me to basically hook into that and then keep around in number of deployments, right? So let's say you wanted to keep around the last 3 or 5 versions. You could specify that here. And you could just pull this in, install it like you would one of the CDK packages. And you could just say new bucket deployment explorator, pass it the values, creates the custom resource, and then it works, right? Maybe inside your company, you have a special Fargate stack deployment, right? And you want to kind of like standardize that across. You can pass these constructs around, and it gives you these kind of like higher level organizational paradigms to take away. If we look at this one, this is the Cdk App Sync Transformer that I did. So if you're familiar with Amplify, you can do like app model directives in there and kind of generates a bunch of resolvers. Basically ported all that over to the CDK. You can use it as a construct. So these are a lot of the things that many of the community members are doing. And if you want something that doesn't exist by default, people are kind of putting a lot of this stuff together. And language-wise, one of the reasons I like TypeScript is because if you want to push a construct out to any of the languages supported, which is TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, I think Java, C# and Go are all 3 in developer preview. They use what's called JSII, which is an AWS creation. And so it takes those and then it'll throw them into all of the other languages. But it doesn't go the opposite way, right? So if you write a construct in Python, you can't push it out to all the other languages. You can use it in Python, but you can't, port it to TypeScript, right? So that's where I've kind of just defaulted to using TypeScript over other things when it was a greenfield project. I think that covers most things. Here you have the documentation, pretty easy to find, but you can kind of click through. So like AWS app config, if we look over here, there are only CloudFormation resources, right? If we look at API gateway, these constructs are the level 2. Then your classes, if we scroll down, then we can see the CloudFormation level 1 constructs. So I will stop there, open it up for any questions or chat or whatever.
Yeah, feel free to unmute and ask Ken questions. If you don't, I will. I've got some queued up here. Anybody got questions for Ken?
Sure. I mean, you mentioned a couple of use cases like when you're dealing with inputs and outputs, importing things from other stacks. It's a little bit easier than maybe with JSON or YAML CloudFormation templates directly. And of course, loops. What other use cases have you found it especially interesting for?
I mean, those are my favorites. Loops have been a big one. Typing, right? Like just having all the autocomplete and not having to do install other stuff. Everything, like if all my other stacks are in TypeScript, I don't really have that context switch between, YAML, JSON, HCL, whatever it is. Everything is all the same. And then building out constructs. So at Steady, for example, we have a team called Substrate, and they handle a lot of the account resources, security, stuff like that, but also like CI/CD stuff. And so they built a construct called Substrate Pipelines, which has like your different account sets and default like pipelines to be created and assets and security rules around all of that. And we can just say, oh, install this package, which we have internally in GitHub. And then you can set up a pipeline and stage pretty easily, right? So passing those things around has been a lot easier and kind of building those paradigms.
Thanks.
I'd like to, one thing that I've really liked with the CDK, and not to step on your toes or anything, but it makes permission grants and linking of services way easier. You do not have to write security groups. You don't have to write bucket policies. You just say, this Lambda is granted read to this bucket, and it takes care of all of that for you. And they even have higher level constructs for, like, say, ECS clusters, where you basically just like give it a few parameters for the entire cluster, and it takes care of everything, like the policies and all of that fun stuff. So it makes certain things so much easier.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a good point. It does make those defaults. So if you remember that table construct, like const table equals new table, you can do table.grant read, and then you just pass it the Lambda function, and it'll grant that principal permission to read from that table without having to, know, okay, is it DynamoDB : read, or, whatever, right? Like,
That does sound pretty awesome. All right, I'm going to butt in with one of my questions now. When you showed off the ProGen stuff, you kind of pointed at and alluded to multiple environments like dev, prod, staging. What does that typically look like in a CDK layout? Do you have like separate folders for the different environments? Are you doing branches for the different environments? How does that work in CDK?
So generally, we do everything from the main branch, and then we'll just create, well, let me take a step back. There is a newer-ish thing called Cdk Pipelines, and so they have the concept of stages. So it basically will synthesize and then pass in, whatever your parameters and stages are for you. And that's how we were traditionally deploying. And then everything was from the main branch, right? So it would go through whatever stages you specified in those pipelines. We've recently been doing more with GitHub Actions and deploying from there, but kind of just saying, like, if environment this, maybe you want this other value, maybe not, right? Kind of like you would with your parameterized templates, but doing it more so in the stack synthesizing. Kind of depends from team to team too. But
What
if
if
you're
you're rolling out?
into,
But what if it's more than just values? What if you're rolling out whole sets of different infrastructure that you like starts in dev and you don't want that to be in production just yet?
yeah, I mean, we've gated it in similar ways. Really, there's no, unless you're using CDK pipelines, there's no kind of like standard or embedded idea or way of doing things, in my opinion, right? So it can really work with any flow that you already have or would like to have. CDK pipelines is a little more opinionated because of some of the limitations around using it, and they kind of like built some specific stuff in there. But if you're not using the Code Star suite in AWS, then it probably doesn't really apply. It's nice, but it's also kind of slow, right? Like, we've seen a lot faster speeds with GitHub Actions or something. But anyway, yeah.
Shocking. I got another question for you. What would CI testing look like of a CDK stack? Have you dived into that at all? Some kind of either just assure that like a stack gets set up the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, so thanks. Forgot to show that as well. If you look at one of the default stacks, I'm actually just going to share my screen again because
Cool.
I think it'll just be easier to walk through. I think I'm sharing the right screen. So
Yep,
this is one of the defaults that gets created for you. So they have this AWS CDK assert library or package, whatever. And basically, we have this test would fail because I deleted that SQSQ, right? I think we can do this. But you can create the CDK app, and then you create whatever your stack is, right? So we had the demo stack, and the default one had an SQSQ, and the visibility timeout was set in it, right? So since it all synthesizes to CloudFormation, you're basically just testing the CloudFormation template when you're writing these tests, not any sort of integration or smoke test or fully end to end. But you can determine that your resources are created with the defaults that you want, or whatever that is.
So does that do that all locally? It
using
doesn't
this.
actually go create anything when it does that test?
Correct. Yeah. So it's basically just like synthesizing the stack and then checking to make sure that the CloudFormation is right. So,
Cool.
Whatever this is. And we've done some different stuff where we would, go ahead and create it, run some canaries against it, and then roll forward and keep going. But there's no like CDK built in. It's really just CloudFormation at that point.
Very cool. Any other questions for Ken?
So I'm aware, I don't typically use CloudFormation, but I'm aware that a stack has a hard limit on the number of resources it can instantiate. Like, does CDK, like, would it notice that and like split you into sub? Okay.
It does not. I wish. I thought it did when I first started using it. And now that you can have 500 resources, things aren't as bad. I think it's 500 now, right? That's the default. When it was 200, that's still a lot, but it's pretty easy to run to 200. It is easy to create nested stacks. So similar to how you just create a new stack, you can add a nested stack and it'll attach and deploy it and synth everything for you. But it doesn't say, oh, you have too much, you should create something else.
You think it'd be aware?
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? Now's your chance, or I assume folks can find you on the Indie Hacker Slack or Twitter.
Yep.
I seem to see you in both those spots pretty regular.
Yep. I try to post, some content. Like I said, I've done a couple constructs to push out there, and yeah, if you have any questions or you need some help with your templates, there is a cdk.dev Slack team, and it's people who are, doing a lot of other things, right? Like maybe there's more EC2, like containers, whatever, right? I haven't done too much of that, which is why I kind of tried to keep this a little simpler and streamlined, but they'll ask questions for, I don't want to say wild stuff, but like there are a lot of people doing new stuff, and then there are a lot of new people in there as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Ken, thank you for being with us today here at IndyAWS. As always, great presentation. It's been a while since you've been up here and done one for us, but it's also been crazy times.